Before we get into today's video, I wanted to mention that I'm giving out a 30% off discount code for all 4 of my online courses: the Hippopotamus Defense, Ponziani Opening, Check, Pierce Defense, and How to Crush the Scandinavian Defense. If you're interested in any 4 of those or all 4 of them, all you gotta do, go down the description below, go down the pinned comment, plug in the discount code 2024. And if it's 2024, when you plug in 2024, you will receive 30% off on any of the courses you decide to invest in. Hope you enjoy. The Scandinavian Defense is Black's 3rd most popular option against the move of e4 in online chess. So many players are going with the Scandi. There's a lot of fun, opening lines, variations, a lot of fun gambits that are coming out of that for Black. And it's against this move e4, right? Black playing this move d5. Very common, very popular move for the Black side. Now, most players simply continue by capturing off the pawn on d5. I'm a big fan of this move, knight c3, and I'm such a big fan of it that I recently made a course on the move of knight to c3, but it also turns out that GM Hikaru Nakamura is a fan of knight c3 as well. If you look at the 2 moves that he plays the most in online chess against the Scandi, he has captured this pawn on d5 on chess.com 114 games. 114 games. But he has played this move of knight c3 319 times. So you got e takes d5, the second most popular move, 114, and then the most popular move from him, the move of knight c3, 319 times. It's not close. Hikaru Nakamura really likes this line, and against e takes e4, he often captures back with the knight, and that's fair. I mean, that's the most sound move that you can play. I personally am a really big supporter, both in my course and in my personal games, of playing pawn to d3 with the dense peon gambit. So much fun here for white, especially if Black ends up capturing off. We're going to take back with our bishop, look to castle queenside fast, and we have a fun, aggressive attacking game ahead of us. But going back to this move, knight c3 again, if Black takes, you can play d3 there. You can also play f3. I'm not the biggest fan of that gambit overall. I think that if you are going to play a gambit there, the dense peon is the best way to go. But taking on e4 there, that's the most sound option, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. But what about this move of d4? Well, it turns out that Hikaru and I have the same approach to this to start. He swings his knight over to g3 fast, which is exactly what I recommend, followed by putting this bishop on c4 if able, eyeing the weakest pawn in chess, f7. Only the king defends that pawn at the start of the game. So this pawn on f7 is very weak. Here in the game, we have the move of knight to f6, and I'm not really, a good enough player to sit here and say that Hikaru Nakamura is making an opening mistake often, but I'm going to say it anyways. Okay, this move of pawn to d3 is what we often see him go with, but this isn't the best move due to the fact that Black can play this idea of knight to a5, hounding this bishop. And yeah, I mean, the engine doesn't love it for white. Knight a5, sure, we can play bishop b3, but then we lose our bishop. This light scored bishop was outside of the pawn chain. It was eyeing f7, such an active minor piece, and it's already out of the game. Okay, now I'm sure Hikaru's very aware of this, and, this position here is very playable. You have ideas like f4, you have ideas like knight f3, knight h4. Really what you want to get your knight to is h4, followed by looking to throw that knight into f5 at some point and just play some fun attacking chess on the king side. I still love this position for white, but I like it more with the bishop. Okay, so against knight f6, the engine here likes the move of knight f3, and this is what I recommend here, knight f3. Now if Black tries to trap your bishop, first off, it's not trapped yet. You don't have a pawn on d3, so you could just bring your bishop back to e2. But more importantly, in this case, knight takes e5. Knight takes e5. We're double attacking the pawn on f7. And if you take our bishop, all right, we capture back. We're up a pawn. What does Black have to show for it? Not much. So going back to knight f6, d3 here, I would say that this is a little bit of an inaccuracy, even though, Hikaru goes with this move the most often. Yeah, there's just a little tidbit, a small inaccuracy, nothing that's going to lose the game, but I really do like hanging on to this bishop on c4. Let me know what you think. Would you rather hang on to your light scored bishop, or are you okay with Black spending time playing knight a5, playing knight takes b3, and then from there looking towards f4 breaks on the king side? But okay, back to the game here. We have bishop b4 check in this game. Okay, this is a strong player. I mean, 29-38 in online chess is Black throwing in a check. We have bishop d2, by far white's best option here. Bishop captures back. We have queen, right? We're not going to take with the king there. Let's capture back with the queen. Allow this king on e1 to either castle king side or queen side, depending on which way we want to go in this kind of game. Queen e7 is played here, and we have bishop to b5. I like this idea from Hikaru. A nice idea in the sense that e5 is actually pretty weak. E5 is pretty weak. Now, no, it's not isolated or anything like that, but if you look at this locked up center, this is the weakest pawn that Black has. And d4 is not weak yet. but the pawn on e5 is. Why is that? e5 defends d4, d4 does not defend e5. And a move like f6, black's got to prep for that. They got to move their knight somewhere. I mean, sure, if you play knight g8, you can play f6, but then your knight on g8 is not very good. And if you play knight d7, giving that pawn more support, knight f5 comes in and the bishop doesn't eye up our knight. And by the way, in this kind of opening, f5 is a square that we constantly need to be focused on. Again, we're often looking to get our knight on g1 into that spot, but sometimes, hey, knight g3 to f5, we'll play it. We're good with that, right? So, okay, we have this move, bishop to d7. And there's some different options here. Now, in the game here, Hikaru goes with knight 1 e2. I understand the logic here, going for this move of f4. But according to Stockfish, knight f3 is actually better. And again, I think it comes down to this pawn on e5 being weak. Okay, this is a weak pawn. It depends on black's structure. In the course that I make, I cover this 3-pawn center, black going c5, d4, e5. In that case, maybe e5 is not so weak because you don't have queen a5 ideas. But in this kind of position, you actually do in some cases, right? You actually do. So here we have knight f3. Let's say black goes with a move like a6, for example. We're going to take, look, if the bishop captures back, knight f5, a brilliant spot for that knight, attacking the queen, attacking the pawn, putting pressure on e5. I mean, black's in major trouble there. And if b takes c6 is played to keep an eye on f5, which is black's best move by far, we have this idea of queen to g5. Queen a5 is good as well, but in this case, queen g5 is better, attacking g7, attacking e5. If a move like rook b8, look, we don't want to lose that pawn. Let's play b3. Calmly play that move. If you want to put us into check, our king will move to f1. We're totally fine there. And it seems like black might be attacking there, but at the end of the day, our king on f1 is very safe, and e5 is even more vulnerable to attack. Going back to knight f3. What if we see a move like h6? Going, you know what? I don't want to let that queen into that spot. I know that e5's weak. I need to be, a little bit prophylactic here in my thinking to stop that queen from jumping in. Well, okay, we take the knight. Capture the knight right off. If a move like b takes c6 so that the bishop keeps an eye on f5, queen a5. Double attacking the pawn. If a move like knight g4, h3. White's winning here. So, bishop g7. The engine here, does like this move of knight f3 over knight 1 e2, but this is still playable for white. We have g6 here, and that makes sense. Sure, you're weakening your dark squares, but at the same time, you are neutralizing this knight on g3. We have h3 here, h5, castling queenside, h4, black just continuing to push, and now we have capturing on c6, b takes c6. The logic behind that makes sense to me. That's not the engine move there. The engine likes bishop takes c6, but with b takes c6, sure, your rook can't activate. But yeah, knight f1 is played in the game, bishop e6, queen a5. This does a few different things. It's putting pressure on c7, a weak pawn. It's putting pressure on e5, a weak pawn. It's putting pressure on a7. Sure, right now it's not hanging, but if the rook ever thinks about moving, thank you for the pawn on a7, potentially, depending on the position. And we're also defending this pawn on a2. So this queen on a5, very active, hard to get rid of it. Hard to get rid of this queen. Knight d7 is played. Hikaru now plays a great move, f4, breaking on the king side of the board. And this is such a common theme when you play knight c3 against the Scandinavian defense. You play knight c3, if they push, you're swinging that knight over to g3. Your opponent is probably not going to have hardly any clue on what they should do because knight c3 is only played 6% of the time. If you're a Scandinavian defense player, I'd be interested to hear how often you see the move knight c3. According to the stats, we hardly ever see it. Recently, I've actually been seeing it more played against me than usual, to say the least, but it's still a pretty rare move, knight c3. In this case, right, when you get that locked up pawn structure, play f4, go after the weak pawn. If black went with a move like f6 here, we can capture, and it might seem like, gosh, we wasted time, we took on e5, and for what reason? But here's the reason. Now the pawn on e5 has no pawn that can ever support it again. Right? There's no pawn on f7 anymore, ready to play f6. This knight is babysitting the pawn on e5, and black has to be very careful about this. If you look at black's pawn structure, it's pretty bad. We can play a move like knight d2. Here, I would probably think about something like knight to f3, maybe king b1 to get off of this diagonal. And it's an interesting position, right? The engine says slight advantage for white. It's a little bit hard, I think, in one sense. Some players might like black because of all this activity really coming down on the queen side. Maybe rook b8 at some point. Even right now, rook b8 is a playable move, according to the engine. and if not the best move. And on the other end, black's pawn structure is atrocious. It is terrible. You got a pawn on h4, pawn on g6, not very well connected, isolated pawn, double pawns on the c file. It just feels like black's pawns are a little bit out of sync, or really a lot out of sync. White's pawns, on the other hand, G2 and H3, we only made one move, and this pawn chain, I mean, it's really hard to complain about it at all. Black has pushed their pawns so much, and sure, that gives them some space, but at the end of the day, it gives them some big old weaknesses as well. So let me know down below as well who you would rather have here. I think that, wanting white or black here is honestly, pretty understandable. Going back to F4, instead here we see the move C5 from black, and now this move of knight to D2. Now, queen takes C7. This might seem tempting, but here's the issue. The queen no longer defends A2. Black can play A5 and just start, looking to hurl down some pressure on the queen side. Black could also take on A2. Black could do that. If we play B3 thinking that we're trapping this bishop, which is a common theme, right? We've seen this before where a bishop will take on A2. We play B3, boom, the bishop's stuck. The bishop's ours. Not so fast, though, in this position. A5 can be played. A4 can be played. And if we take the bishop, well, we just run into check. And this is not good for us at all. The rook is extremely active. The queen is crashing in. The pawn in front of our king isn't our own pawn. And yeah, I mean, this is losing for white. So we got to be very careful here. Knight D2. Very good move from Hikaru here. Obviously, he's a good player, so he's going to find good moves. Castling kingside, and now we have B3. Just looking to slow things down a little bit on the queen side of the board. Rook A B8, Rook D F1. I like this idea. And after F6, we have G3. Just going, you know what? I'm going to keep this side of the board closed. My king's on this side of the board. I'm going to play, my pawns on the light scores, A2, B3, C2, D3, and really just make it so that C4 can't be played without us winning that pawn. But on the king side of the board, I'm going to break this position open like crazy. I have pressure on E5. I have pressure on H4. C4 is played here from black. And in this case, we have D takes C4. Now, the engine move here is actually B takes C4. And, by doing that, you do open up B3 for your knight, a good defensive presence. But I understand why Hikaru here in a blitz game isn't wanting to open up the B file. A D takes C4, very, understandable move. Knight C5 is what black should have went with here. Knight C5 with the idea of maybe D3 at some point, maybe something like Rook to B6, Rook A6, maybe Knight B7, asking that queen where the heck it's gonna go. But instead here in the game, we have the move D3, and then black throwing in the knight. But in that case, we can just play Rook F3, King C2. Sure, you can take on D3 all you want, but at the end of the day, you only got 3 pieces left. You got the king on the 3rd rank, but you only got a rook, queen, and bishop left. So, I mean, there's just not much firepower left. If a move like queen d6 now, queen c3, our pieces are nice and compact, protecting our king. We have a queen on c3, 2 knights closely tucked, and this rook on h1 can get involved as well. Not to mention that black's, they're still under some pressure. We got pressure on h4, we got pressure on e5. If black thinks about this, sure, we get some more activity with the queen. Although here I would probably think about g takes f4. And just looking to, potentially put a rook on g1 to go after that king a little bit. But king c2 is played there. Rook b6. We're up 2 points. We're up 2 pawns of material. Queen c3. Knight c1. Defending that pawn on d3. Black has 3 attackers, but we have 1, 2, 3, 4 defending pieces. Black would need 5 attackers to our 4 defenders to win the trade. So they're not even close. Bishop f7. We have capturing off on e5. Rook hf1, forming a battery ram. Capturing on f7. And this move g2, this is actually a pretty good try for black. This is a good try. I mean, at this point in the game, you're losing no matter what. You got to try to find some way to get back into this game. Black's only hope right now, they're currently down 8 points in material. Their only hope is to promote into a queen and do it cleanly. In the game here, we have rook f1. Turns out that Hikaru missed a tactic here, and no, I did not find this. Stockfish did. In fact, this position here, this position, you might want to pause it and just try to figure out what's the best move according to the engine. What's the best move? All right, what's the best move? There's a few moves here that are good. By the way, rook f1 is a good move. That's a winning move. Knight f3 is the 3rd best move. Queen takes e5 is the 2nd best. What's the best move here? This is something you could see in Puzzle Rush or something like that. The best move here is rook to g7 check. I love this idea. I love it. Let's say the king doesn't take the rook. right? Let's say black doesn't take that rook, and we see king h8. Well, we take on e5. You can make a queen all you want. We take off the pawn, among other options. And yeah, I mean, if a move like rook to f6, we can throw in a mate or take the rook and then mate. If a move like king h7, we can throw in mate on h5 or g7. This game is over. Going back. What if a move like king f8? Again, we just take the pawn and promote all you want. We have queen e7. This game is over. And if the king captures the rook, here's the idea. We can take on e5, say thank you for the knight. That's a little fork there, right? Not only knights fork pieces. Our queen can fork stuff too. It's when you're attacking two different pieces. And sure, your opponent can save one, but they can't save both. Maybe you're attacking two, maybe you're attacking three or four, but black can't save everything. We take off that knight and the queen defends the promotion square of g1. Resignable for black. But going back, we have the move of rook to f1. Black can take, but then we're just going to capture back, and we're up so much freaking material as white. Knight takes e4 is played there. We do got to be careful. Taking with the knight, black cleanly promotes into a queen. Not the best idea. If we take with the d pawn, rook takes d2 check. And if we move this king, promotion. If we take the rook and the second rook, well, we're still going to face, a queen on f1 and we're losing. But in this case, we have the move of queen takes e5 from Hikaru, going, you know what? Take my rook. I'll simply capture back. Take my knight. In that case, rook g1, you're not going to promote here. Knight f3 is played. We have queen g3, queen takes g2, and here black resigns the game as this knight is trapped. We're up 1 point in material, and we're about to be up 4 points when that knight falls off the board. The move of knight c3 against the Scandinavian defense. Such a freaking underrated opening for the white side. I hope you guys enjoy my course for those of you that look to invest in it. And if you don't, that's totally fine too, right? I'm looking to post some more content on knight c3 on this channel. I think it's a move that looks very boring, very timid, but it's anything but. Peace. Guys, I hope y'all enjoyed today's video, and just a quick reminder that in addition to the 30% off all online courses sale this month, we wanted to also give a 20% off sale on our physical merch all December. We got shirts, hoodies, mugs, and more on the merch shelf below, and we got a lot more on the website, so check them out and use the code WINTER20 for 20% off. On top of that, I wanted to give a big shout out to my Patreon supporters for the month of December in 2024. I appreciate you guys a ton. It's been great getting to know you. And yeah, I'm just humbled by your support. And if you guys haven't thought about joining the Patreon community before, there's some exclusive benefits that you gain by becoming a member. And I look forward to seeing you over there on the platform. Peace.